Hey, fellow mathers. Before we get into this episode, we want to share with you how you can get access to free content, professional learning that will keep your students engaged and doing the math that matters. Get ready to go to this link, mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge.
That's right. Registration is open for the free Math is Figureoutable Challenge that's starting May 15th and runs to the 17th at 7 p.m. Central. We're going to have 3 nights jam-packed with learning and routines that you can take straight to your classroom.
In these challenges, we have a great time. We do some math, talk about classroom experiences, give away super cool bonuses and prizes. You won't just walk away with routines that are naturally engaging and encourage your students to think mathematically. You'll also have a chance to win over 6K worth in prizes, including a few virtual PD sessions for your school. I'll be joined by my wonderful co-host Kim and special guest Jenna Labe.
You can register at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge for a fantastic learning experience. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Now on to the show.
Hey, fellow mathematicians, welcome to the podcast where math is figureoutable. I'm Pam.
And I'm Kim.
And you found a place where math is not about memorizing or mimicking, waiting to be told or shown what to do, but it's about making sense of problems, noticing patterns, and reasoning using mathematical relationships. We can mentor mathematicians as we co-create meaning together. Not only are algorithms not particularly helpful in teaching mathematics, but rotely repeating steps actually keep students from being the mathematicians they can be.
Okay, so in this episode, we're going to answer a question you got on Facebook from Diana. And she said, I just want to say I have thoroughly enjoyed your podcast and free learning challenge. So exciting, right? You've opened my eyes to how math could and should be taught to our students. I'd love to hear a podcast of how you'd structure your math block now if you were in a K-12 setting. I know it would look different for each grade, but I'm really thinking of revamping my lessons in August to make more time for kids to talk about math with each other. Thanks for all you do. I teach 5th and 6th grade math students, and you're really so inspiring. What a great message.
Awesome. So thanks, Diana. Appreciate that. It's a little later than August when we're answering this, but we did get to it as soon as we could. So, fabulous question. What does it look like? And Kim, we've just gotten a message from a couple of people, but specifically Tad Watanabe asked about why we only do computation, or we sort of talk about computation a lot. And that's kind of been pinging, and then this thing from Diana, and we were like, maybe we should talk about the fact that we don't do just computation, but we do other things and what it would look like. So one of the things that we've mentioned briefly before in the podcast is that we do take what we call a 2/3, 1/3 approach, or sometimes maybe a 4/5, 1/5, or a 3/4, 1/4 approach. So Kim, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I am thinking about my math classroom, I definitely have some things that my school or my principal or my district requires of me, right? I have a scope and sequence sometimes not. And so I tried to think about what is really important to me as far as splitting up my time to do what was required of me, but also that I could do some of the things that I know was really important for students. And so I really consider the 2/3, 1/3 was the 2/3 is kind of what I have to do, but also can be really good stuff. And the 1/3
in
is
the way that
time
you do it.
in the way
Sorry.
that you do it. But the 1/3 is the playtime for me. It's the time that like I throw in the things that I know are super great for kids and things that I love to do with kids. And that was kind of a way that I sorted out how in my mind I made sense of that time. And sometimes the 1/3 is separated from the 2/3, like 2 different times of the day because I was elementary. And sometimes they back up together. But anyway, that's how I split my math time.
So let's kind of separate that out a little bit, because I think you mean a little bit more of content and a little bit less of the way you do stuff.
Okay.
So you're not saying you do cruddy teaching during the 2/3 time.
I hope not.
and you do the fun stuff during the 1/3. That's not what you mean.
No. So the standards that might have been the scope and sequence that my district handed me and said, right now during this part of the year, you're supposed to be teaching fractions. And so if it was a fraction time of the year, then in that 2/3 time, then I'm working on fractions. And in the 1/3 time, I might be doing a whole host of other things, but I really kept pace with the scope and sequence during the 2/3 and filled in other things I knew my kids needed during that 1/3.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so some of the things that could belong in the 2/3 time, some of the instructional methods that could belong in the 2/3 time while you're doing the content that your scope and sequence is kind of demanding. The way that you attack that content could be things like what we call rich tasks, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we call them investigations, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they're open middle tasks, or low floor, high ceiling tasks. So lots of different names. We actually kind of have particular ways that we like to do rich tasks. So it's not just
Mm-hmm.
kind of whatever anybody thinks about what a rich task is. And we've talked about that in a couple of other episodes. Maybe we'll put those episode numbers in the show notes. So rich tasks are definitely happening in that 2/3 time, but also we think about if we're doing that rich task in this time to get at that main content that's sort of in the scope and sequence, what do we need to have percolating? What kind of things need to
Mm-hmm.
be bubbling up for students? And so then we think about what kind of instructional routine could we do to help bring up those ideas,
Right.
or to help those things happen. And that often is a problem string. Sometimes it's a different instructional routine, but often it's a problem string. We think about what needs to be happening, percolating, bubbling up for kids to make the rich tasks successful, not what kids do already need to have cemented and for sure, like it's all like cinched. No, just what needs to be kind of happening, bubbling, percolating, spouting off, like sort of pinging around the room.
Yeah.
So we might do a problem string to get that happening. Then we do the rich task. And as we come out of that rich task with the math congress, we do sort of solidify some things, but really in a rich task, we envision that kids are struggling. They're productively, they're grappling, they're in disequilibrium, they're clarifying, they're making sense of things. So as we come out of that rich task, we're just going to admit that lots of good things were happening, but we
Mm-hmm.
might not have cinched several of those
Right.
things. We
Right.
may have cinched something in the Congress, but chances are not really. Like we might
Mm-hmm.
have brought some things into more clarity, but we still need to like cinch some things more. And so we might do that following that rich task with that Congress with a problem string to cinch
Sure.
something, or with another instructional routine. Most often it's a problem string, but there are some other instructional routines out there that could help us kind of cinch some things. And we sort of see that kind of as a flow that happens in that 2/3 time. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Did I miss
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yes, I missed things.
Oh, no,
I
I
said,
said, I thought you said,
I asked both questions in a row.
you said both. And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Did,
I'm
did I
with
leave
you.
anything out? Did I miss anything? Those are two different.
No. So the 2/3 time, I think what you described is exactly what it looked like for me. That's the richness of really digging into the content that we're talking about right now and letting kids grapple. It's kind of messy sometimes, and then having really good conversations.
Yeah, excellent. So then what happens in the 1/3 time? Tell us about some of the
Yeah.
things that are kind of in this other track.
So the 1/3 time, I was thinking about like what are some of my favorite things to do during that time, and some of it again is it's maybe not fun but necessary, and some of it is still a little bit of playtime. So in the 1/3 time would have been when I pulled small groups to work on things. I've mentioned to you before that I was a firm believer in having kids look back at their work, whether they, did really well on something or whether there were some things that they needed to be clearer about in their notation, or something that I looked at it and there wasn't really a lot of evidence of them making sense of something. So almost, it wasn't a huge paper pencil assignment giver, but almost everything that I handed a kid, they came back and handed back to them, and they analyzed it, and then they came back to me, and that takes some time. So, small groups, kids looking back at their work. I might pose a would you rather. We might do some test formatted practice, right? Because I
What?
taught in
Test formatted practice, Kim?
Yeah, I taught in testing grades, and so I wasn't going to let the types of questions or the fact that it was worded in a way that maybe I hadn't had them see before. So, there's a little bit
Or
of
the
that.
fact that they had to bubble because they didn't bubble for
Yes.
you for
Oh
homework.
man.
So you wanted
Yes.
to make sure that you were
Mhm.
smart, you were wise, that the test day was not going to be this big shock. was not
Oh,
going to be like,
yeah.
what? I've never seen
Yeah.
this before. I've never done
Yeah.
this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
you gave kids experience. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
hey, it's all about experience, right? You
Mm-hmm.
gave kids experience with, hey, you are going to run into items like this,
Mm-hmm.
ways of the questions being worded,
Mm-hmm.
the format, the ways they were
Mm-hmm.
going to have to answer.
Mm-hmm.
All of that made
What do
sense
I
that
do
you
when I
took.
don't have a lot of space on my paper?
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah.
you gave experience to students
Mm-hmm.
so that they
Uh-huh.
would be able to better jump into a test time
Yeah, absolutely.
and actually do as well as they could do, not being hampered because they didn't have experience
Yeah.
with some of the formatting or something. Yeah,
So
so
that's one of those maybe not so fun things that I mentioned that we still have to do. It's still a reality for
well, and I
test
teased you a
taking.
little bit, like, really test
Yeah.
formatted, but I actually completely support the fact that you don't want your
Yeah.
students to take that stupid test and have it and not be able to do as well as they can for reasons other than math. Like, let's get those out of
Yes.
the way. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep. So we might have done, if a problem string wasn't on my radar for within the rich task or investigation that we were doing, I might have done a problem string during that 1/3 time.
And I think what
Gosh,
you
there's
mean
a
by that
whole
is like
host of good routines.
some other content, right? Like
Yes.
you're thinking, hey, for this grade level, say you're in fourth grade, I know that students are going to be working on blank all year long. Like, we're going
Yes.
to be getting multiplication into bigger and bigger chunks, getting better at these strategies all year long. So you might have this in your head, this kind of separate track happening of where,
Yeah.
even though right now we're in geometry, I'm going to keep this separate track of multiplying by bigger chunks and strategies
Adding
happening
decimal.
as you
Yeah.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I just listed a couple of my favorite. Which one doesn't belong? Open middle. Guess my number. Of course, as close as it gets. Relational thinking. Um, the small group pre and post, like getting kids. If we're about to do some fraction work, just kind of getting into kids' heads a little bit about what do you already know, so that I'm not just repeating things. I'm not tackling things that I know my kids already know and wasting time. So a whole
Mm-hmm.
host of things in that 1/3 time could be happening. And they change. They
Nice.
change regularly.
Yeah. And I think this could be true at any grade level, that we could kind of
Yes.
have this idea of what are these major things that I know need to happen in my subject, my grade level, but aren't maybe in the unit that we're in, but I want to keep that track going.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm going to give an example. A thing that I might do all through high school might be some work towards factoring quadratics,
Hmm.
where we just deal with, hey, if I give you these two numbers, what pair of factors would multiply to this product, but would also sum to this sum,
Hmm.
and add to this sum, and that we might do that work so that when we actually get to factoring quadratics, students, when we bring the variables in, students are already messing with those number relationships, and so then it sort of slides a little bit easier. And I might do that after we factor quadratics to kind of get
Yes.
kids better at it and keep it
Yeah.
alive, because I know it's
Yep.
going to be kind of an important thing. It will show up in calculus where students need to factor quadratics, and so
Yep.
that just might be a relationship that A, is kind of fun to play with, and B,
Hmm.
will might want to keep alive at other times.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the maybe the goal, the overarching thing to keep in mind as you consider what would be some things that would happen in that 1/3 time. Well, we have a lot of these instructional routine types of things. So you could choose from, like you said, and maybe I won't repeat them, or maybe I will repeat them. Problem strings, problem talks, games, which one doesn't belong, open middle, would you rather, as close as it gets, relational thinking, guess my number, like all of those kinds of things.
Hmm.
But then you say to yourself, what's the content to do in
Yes.
those?
Yes.
These are the major big ideas, big concepts, big trip up things that I know we need to start at the beginning of the year and carry through
Yep.
all through the year to keep building and getting students better at.
Which is such in my opinion, a better way of spiraling some ideas that we know we have to give kids experience with, instead of just buying a pre-made spiral sheet that they like
Mm,
have one question on geometry and one question on fractions and one question on addition. Those kinds of things where the idea is to give kids experience with lots of different things repeatedly. I just think
hmm
these are a much better instructional routine.
Well, and let me dive into that just a little bit, because there's some really good programs out there that I think brought that to the forefront for many of
Yes.
us.
Yep.
I'll give CPM credit for really helping me think about the fact. In fact, also, oh golly, what's that? Saxon. I mean, uh, which I don't really recommend a whole lot, but
Yep.
they brought to the forefront for many of us this idea of, whoa, if we kind of spiral this practice, that could be helpful.
Yep.
However, the way that Saxon did it, because of the way they taught the original, I'm kind of being a little negative here, but I'm going to be. The way that they sort of taught the initial stuff was so based on rote memory. And that if you
Yes.
could just mimic what the teacher was doing, that what ended up happening was, if students were in that mimicking compliant mode, that I'll just compliantly mimic what you want, then that spiral practice over time
Right.
worked really well for that particular student. But for
Yep.
anybody who doesn't learn well that way, it was horrible, because every time that spiral practice came back around, they're like, oh, can't do it again.
Yep. Yep.
And it didn't, there was nothing to help them have better access to it. Now, I'm actually going to say, I just said it, that it was okay for the kid that was compliant and was willing to kind of just, mimic and memorize. But in reality, it's not okay for that kid, because it gives you this false sense that what you're define okay. You're getting answers, and so you're getting grades, but you're not mathematizing. So it really isn't good for any learner. However, the idea of building small, or starting small and building throughout the entire year, so that we keep coming back to these major things. We learned that from those folks, and we definitely want to apply it. We just think there's a better way to do it, which is through those instructional routines that we just mentioned.
Sure. Yep.
Hey, Kim, I'm wondering that if what might be good, as we've been talking, especially as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, I want to give an example here. Oh, I want to give an example there. But I'm aware that we're sort of up against kind of our timeline that we usually have for podcasts. What would you think if we did that in the next podcast episode?
Oh, that'd be great.
We give some examples. Maybe we'll choose, major grades kind of along the span, K-12.
Okay.
We'll give you some examples of what it could look like.
That'd be great.
Game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fabulous. Cool. So y'all, at this time of the year, we want to let you know that there are some things happening that don't happen all that often. Y'all, if you're interested to learn more in depth what this could look like, on the ground help for teaching figure-outable math, well, check out our online workshops, because registration has just opened. If I may, I'll tell you just a little bit about it. We've got Building Edition for Young Learners. That's for pre-K through second grade teachers, where we really dive into that young learning. What does it take to help students develop counting, into counting strategies, into additive reasoning? So if you teach young students, our Building Edition for Young Learners is fabulous. If you teach older students, Building Powerful Multiplication for grades 3 and up really helps you develop the major models and strategies for multiplication. And also looking back, how do you develop multiplication with young learners? But then we go clear into, what does it look like to really multiplicatively reason in the high school? Building Powerful Division does the same thing for division for grades 3 and up. Building Powerful Proportional Reasoning, middle grades teachers, you really want to be looking at, how can we help develop reasoning, not just solving proportions, answer getting. And also in the high school, we've got Building Powerful Linear Functions. Bam is just coming out. We are just launching our first high school workshop, great for 8th grade on up, all about linear functions, where we take students from really not knowing very much at all about linear functions to writing the equation of a line from no rote memory in about 15 tasks. Yeah. And I'm so excited for this to launch, because it might be my best work yet. We've been creating it and getting it ready, and it's coming out. I cannot wait for the world to see Building Powerful Linear Functions. So if you teach 8th grade and up, head on into that one. Check out registration. So excited.
And you know what? There's so many great workshops, and registration only opens 3 times a year. And this is one of those times. It's just in time for the school year to start for many of us. So you'll want to check out mathisfigureoutable.com/workshops, or we'll have the link in the show notes for information and to register.
So thank you for tuning in and teaching more and more real math. To find out more about the Math is Figureoutable movement, visit mathisfigureoutable.com. Let's keep spreading the word that math is figureoutable. Thank you for listening and making math more figure-outable.
To learn even more, make sure you register for our free challenge at mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. You are not going to want to miss the evenings of May 15th through 17th, starting at 7 p.m. Central.
Math teaching, go register now. That's mathisfigureoutable.com/challenge. Join us to make math more and more figure-outable. And if you can't join live, register and we'll send you access to the recordings. We'll see you there.